How do I rehearse something that is live? That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video, because basically one of the things that I shared in yesterday's video really stood out to me and made me think about this specific topic, I guess, more than anything else. So because of that, I thought the need to go deeper into this. And it's interesting because yesterday's video was supposed to be, I guess, supposed to be a life update, just to kind of like smooth my transition into doing these styles of videos, these raw videos rather than refined videos. And interestingly enough, like, I don't think yesterday's video felt like a life update at all in any way, shape or form. But you guys who watched yesterday's videos, let me know. All right, so let's jump into it. Like, how do you rehearse something that is live? As I shared in the video previously, one of the things that came to my mind is we live a life where so much is live. So much is real time. So for example, I'm a married man and my interactions with my wife are real time. And today I was in a taxi for a long period of time, about an hour. And one of the things I was saying to the taxi driver is that seeds become trees, roots become fruit. And I was sharing with him that one of the things we have to get good at doing, and it's like, sometimes it's so weird how we have these deep introspective conversations with taxi drivers or with I don't want to say the strangest people, because it's not that those people are strange, but it's interesting how we have some of our deepest conversations with people we never yet expect to have those with. So that's what I mean. So I'm sharing with this taxi driver in the car today, in this plus 1 hour drive, and I was sharing with him that seeds become trees and roots become fruits. And I was saying to him that if we see a seed, unless we have what I'm calling imagination, obviously we can call it so many other things. I guess the real term is foresight, right? But unless we have the ability to see ahead of what things are going to compound into or what things are going to become, what generally ends up happening is we just see a seed. We just see the seed and don't see what the seed can become. And what happens for a lot of people is because they only see the seed in their limited view or their limited vision, their greed takes hold of their seed instead of their seed producing everything they need. And seeds are supposed to produce trees, which mean for those of us who are entrusted with seeds, we've got to get good at having the imagination, or more importantly, the foresight to see what that seed can be, to see that seed is going to be a specific kind of tree, right? So I share all this because as I was thinking through the concept of how do you rehearse something that's live, it really just started making me think about like the life we live. Like everything we're doing is live. And although we go to school, like I used to work in schools, for those of you who know, although we go to school, and in school they teach us prepare for the one exam, which is kind of like the perfect model to teach us to work and get paid once. And what we actually do, if we take a step back and look at the real world, is we recognize that the people who are the most successful in marriage, the people who are most successful with money, the people who are most successful in any myriad of things that most people are interested in, don't use that model. They don't use the model of work, get paid. Instead, they use the model that is actually embedded in science, actually embedded in history, actually embedded in every single thing that really works. And it's that whole seed becoming tree, it's that whole roots becoming fruits mentality. And that is, we do work, we do invest, but we understand that an appropriate investment leads to a bountiful harvest. And that is not to say that there's no bridge between the appropriate investment. There's definitely a bridge. But the interesting thing is the bridge isn't equal to the planting of the seed. All right. So Sammy, what do you mean? Well, the fastest and simplest way for me to explain this is there's a verse in the Bible which super expresses this, right? And that verse says, one plants, another waters, but God brings the increase. And what does that help us understand? It helps us understand in the true ecosystem of how things work, you don't have to be the only person making things work, right? And if you're someone who's been following me for any amount of time, you would have heard me say this. One of my strap lines that I say on a regular basis is incremental partnerships create exponential results. Okay, I'll say it again in case you need to pick up your pen. Incremental partnerships create exponential results. What does that mean? That means when a human being partners with a seed, later on, that incremental partnership can become a tree. And a tree is not an incremental result, it's an exponential result, because a tree is not hey, my seed came back and gave me another seed. A tree is, hey, my seed came back and gave me something humongous, something exponential, which not only is humongous and exponential, but comes with all of these fruit. And because of all of these fruit inside of them provide all of these much more seeds. And all of these much more seeds can give me way more of what I need, right? So coming back to like the actual point, because I don't want this to veer too much from the point and people not see what I'm sharing, and that now become a catalyst to people misconstruing or you not getting what I'm actually talking about, right? So if we're thinking about this idea, how do you rehearse when stuff is live? I'll throw out a few examples so this can be like super clear for everyone, right? Like the first thing that comes to my mind is like the whole challenge that has been occurring over the last few years with Ukraine and Russia, okay? Now, how do you rehearse for that? How do you prepare for that? How do you rehearse for war? How do you prepare for war? And the answer is you can't, okay? This is the exact same thing that we see in the Bible, right? Where the Bible literally teaches that if you study through the book of Proverbs, that if you're someone who's wise, what you do is, the Bible says the prudent man, it uses the word prudent to talk about a characteristic of a wise person. It says the prudent man sees evil and turns away, or the prudent man sees evil and decides to hide, right? Which basically means a lot of what we have to do in real time. But the reality is you can't rehearse for something that's live. And because you can't rehearse for something that's live, that's why I think a lot of people value and appreciate when they see something's live, because they recognize you couldn't have rehearsed for that. Now, although you can't rehearse for it, you can prepare for it. And I think this is where the challenge is. And this is where what I was talking to the cab driver today, the taxi driver today, comes into play in terms of what I'm talking about, right? Many of us, because we've been quote unquote schooled, okay? And for those of you who want to know what I mean when I say quote unquote schooled, there's a great book out there. I'll put the name and the description in I'll put the name and the name of the book and the title of the author in the description of this video, which basically talks about how there's a difference between education and schooling, okay? And many of us, I'm included, we've been schooled. And because we've been schooled, and I don't mean schooled like the colloquialism from like East London or growing up in London, right? Oh, you got schooled. No, like schooled in the sense that we were taught to run when we hear the bell. We were taught to sit down and be quiet whilst the, holy authoritarian teacher stood up and spoke, right? We've been taught, we've been enrolled into that way of thinking, which makes it easy for us to now go into the workforce and become the quote unquote lemmings. And again, for those of you who don't know what lemmings are, lemmings was a game that when I was young, like was kind of like the only game people could play on the computer. And it was basically a game where everybody was following the leader, okay? And those of you who are old enough to know what lemmings are, let me know inside of the comments, okay? Because then I know I'm really talking to my people, right? But basically, like, we've been educated into becoming lemmings, okay? And many of us know this, all right? And I'm not sharing anything that's, I don't think, groundbreaking, right? But maybe some of us need a reminder. But the reality with all of this is that training, that schooling stops us from being able to prepare for things that happen in real time, because we are so fixated on how we think or perceive things are supposed to be. So for example, if you think things are supposed to be the 40-40-40 plan, and for those of you who are wondering, Samuel, what's the 40-40-40 plan? The 40-40-40 plan is where you work 40 hours a week for 40 weeks a year for 40 years of your life in order to hopefully get paid for the rest of your life 40% of your salary, okay? And it's a really weird plan, but it's the plan that so many people, I'm looking for a pen right now, have signed up to, okay? It's a plan that so many people have said, yo, this is gonna be the plan I subscribe to. This is the plan that I'm doing my Netflix and chill subscription to every single month, which again, I'm not saying that it's super crazy and you shouldn't be doing it. I'm just saying if you're doing it, know why you're doing it. Know that you might be doing it because you've been enrolled and educated into it. Also know that you might be doing it because you had no intention to do it and it quote unquote fell upon you, okay? And if that be the case, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that if you get the opportunity to sit back, evaluate it and say, you know what, I want to do this or I don't want to do this. Now, for me, You might be thinking, well, Samuel, why is this so important for you? Well, okay, for those of you who are brand new watching this video and thinking, wow, this guy is like just rapping, like, my name is Samuel. I can win a Kim win. I help people create consistent and colossal cash flow using resources and revenues hidden in plain sight. So the reason why this is of so much importance to me to convey, to share, to help people with, to assist people with, to talk on, like, even if this doesn't become something of value to you in the sense of, oh, Samuel, you helped me to change, you helped me to develop, you helped me to move, you helped me to ascend to a new level in my life. At least, Samuel, you brought up a topic that I should be thinking about, and I didn't necessarily allow myself to think about it because I let myself be, I guess I'd say the word like distracted by all the distractions out here, the social medias, the normal medias, and all the rest of the medias, right? Now, coming back to the point, you may be saying to yourself, okay, Samuel, cool, I get it, but why are you so vested in this? The reason I'm so vested in this is because I used to be a teacher. I used to teach secondary and A-level maths. The reason I'm even more vested in this is because I used to be a teacher trainer. I used to teach teachers how to teach. And let me tell you what I discovered. I discovered that it's a scam. And I don't want to say it like this because if I say it like in a blanket statement, people just assume, oh, like it's a scam. Like he's calling the education system a scam. But didn't his parents travel from Africa to the UK in order for him to have a better education and live a better way? All of that is right. Everything I hear you say. But the reality in all of this is my parents did the best they could with the information they had. And it is incumbent upon me, it's incumbent upon you to do the best you can, to do the best I can with the information that I have. And if I'm privy to information that my parents were not privy to, or more importantly, if things have changed, here's the question: when do we change? Do we just keep doing the same thing because everyone's been doing the same thing? So as I was pondering on this question, like, how do you rehearse for something that's live? I started to realize you can't rehearse for that which is live. Like, those of you who know, you know, I really, really enjoy going live online. Like, I enjoy going live on the social media platforms, right? I mainly enjoy it because I really appreciate live feedback. I appreciate energy. I appreciate people saying, oh, Samuel, that point you made was powerful. Oh, Samuel, that helped me. Like, I appreciate knowing what is of value to the people I'm speaking to. Because if I met someone in a park, if I met someone at a workplace, if I met someone in a property or business transaction, I wouldn't just talk for the sake of talking. I would talk in order to instill and provide value for them, similar to the taxi driver I was with today. Like, it's about adding value to my fellow human being. And because of that, when I'm live, guess what happens? I get real-time feedback where people are saying, Samuel, that really helped me, or Samuel, I've never thought of it like that, or Samuel, I've never seen it like that. And what that does is that helps me understand, okay, this is what this person needs, or this is what these people need, right? So I'm sharing this with you because it's me going live. It's me having a passion to go live. It's me having been going live since 2016 when I first got on social media that helped me realize that there is no real way to rehearse for that which is live. You can have a script. Some people love scripts, right? I have recorded some of my videos, those refined videos, if you call them that, using scripts at times, right? Not all of them, but the odd one. You can use a script. You can use an outline, okay? My first videos that I recorded on YouTube years ago, not the raw ones where I'm literally holding the phone, but the ones a little bit after that, I used outlines because that was the easiest way for me to put something together and deliver value to people, right? And the overwhelming majority of my videos are just me riffing off the cuff, not like this, not this raw style, but it's me riffing off the cuff, right? And the reason I share all this is because the more you engage with life, with what's really happening in your life, with what's really live, the more you realize you can't rehearse for it. And the more you realize because you can't rehearse for it, you have to get prepared for it. And the only way you can prepare is by doing things that are going to put you in the best position to be able to quote unquote perform or deliver or show up, which is probably the best way to say it, in the time. So going back to the example I spoke about earlier, the Ukraine and Russia scenario and situation and the geopolitical elements that are connected to it, like how America has an influence, how the UK has had an influence and has an influence, and all of those connections, like a president, Zelensky, or any president for that matter, cannot prepare for that moment. Excuse me, they cannot, let me correct myself. They cannot rehearse for that moment. They can only prepare for that moment. And being prepared is about having awareness. It's about having awareness of your history. Where do you come from? Where do your people come from? Where does these divisive arguments come from? What's the nature of this, right? Now, those who are aware of history, guess what? They have a completely different view on a situation. Those who are aware of history, they see things completely different. And the same way those who are aware of history, which is what's past, have a different view on a situation, so too do those who have a different view of the future. Okay. And even we can even talk about in terms of the present. So I've got like my high frequency formula, which I teach my coaching clients, right? And that feeds into what I'm talking about. So guys, for those of you who are interested in learning more about the high frequency formula, just write in the comments high frequency, okay? And then I'll do a whole video on that in the future, and you guys will be able to understand exactly what I'm talking about specifically. But the point I'm making is it takes our views of our history to determine how we maneuver in our present. It takes our view of what's going on right now to determine how we maneuver in the present. It takes how we perceive or view the future to determine how we move in the present. So for those people in the UK who have a feeling that things are not going to get better, who have a feeling that they're not going to have an opportunity to prosper, they're not going to have an opportunity to bridge the gap, all right? Because there's certain people out here on social media, like Gary Economics, if I just speak openly, right, who are telling the world that we need to tax the wealthiest people way more because the gap between income and property acquisition is absolutely massive, and it's never been this big, and because it's this big, like, we need to do something about it. And like, yes, we do need to do something about it, but every idea is not necessarily a bright idea, or as some people often say, like, a good idea is not necessarily a God idea, okay? And I'll just stop there, right, for sake of not necessarily shooting down any people's sacred cows. But the point I'm trying to make is all our decision making, every single one of us as human beings, is often birthed out of how we perceive the past, how we portray the future, and what we believe about our present. And this is the reason why you can't rehearse for what's live. You can't rehearse for Putin saying, listen, Ukraine is on. Like, you can't rehearse for, let me talk about something a bit more close to home, Donald Trump saying, hey, Nigeria, if you don't, take care of those Christians, I'm gonna come in there guns are blazing, and posting such stuff on Twitter. Like, how do you rehearse for that? Like, if you're like, I don't know much about politics. I'm just speaking about the little bit that I do know. But if you're the president of Nigeria, like, how do you respond to that? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna stop there. Basically, guys, let's bring this back to where most of us are actually at, right? In your personal finances, in your personal family relations, in your personal future, the question I'm asking you, I guess the question I'm talking on, the question I want to bring to the table for us to shine a bit of a light on is, have we been trying to rehearse for something that's live, which is basically our life? Or are we realizing from this conversation that I can't actually rehearse for something that's live? I need to actually prepare for my life. I need to prepare for what's live. And the reality is, if we're coming to that conclusion that I'm not able to rehearse for what's live, I need to prepare for what's live, then a real good, deep, introspective question might be, can I truly prepare for what's live by doing the same thing repetitively again and again and again? Now, to bring this super home, some people might call this the rat race. Some people might call this, what I call this, the cycle of sameness. Some people might call this the cycle of similarity. But I remember hearing this once before, which I think will be very pertinent to this conversation. And that is that there are people who will tell you they've got 20 years experience driving a truck or driving a lorry, right? And the reality is they don't have 20 years experience, because it doesn't take 20 years to learn how to drive a lorry. And in most people's cases, that's their story. In most people's cases, they're rehearsing for something live rather than preparing for their life. And in saying that, with the lorry driver as an example, that person actually has maybe 1 year's experience repeated over 20 years of time, or maybe 6 months experience repeated times 2 over 20 years of time. And I guess my heart in this conversation is us understanding that sometimes we need to take a step back and not just assume that the way we've been rehearsing for our life or things that are live is the right way. And sometimes we actually have to ask ourselves, like, should I be preparing rather than rehearsing? So I did a real short, simple video on Instagram. This was a few months back. And in the video, I said something quite profound. I said, stop wasting your money on pensions that aren't really going to pay you. And then later on in that short video, I said, because £1,000 today is worth tens of thousands of pounds tomorrow. And the reality is, those people who watch that video and tuned in and think like, Samuel, I see what you're saying, they're going to be preparing their tomorrow by working on their today. They're going to be doing something today to, in this case of the example in the video, to generate an extra £1,000 today, because they know it's worth an additional £10,000 later down the road tomorrow. Okay. And most people don't do that. Most people stay stuck how I was stuck in 2014, 2015. I'll tell you this specific example. I was working as a teacher, and I remember my head of maths, said to me, hey, Samuel, are you going to be striking with us on Thursday, right? And let's assume the day was Thursday. And it was my first school that I was working in. I didn't really know like what strikes were all about. So I asked the head of the department, I said, hey, like, what's the striking thing about? How does it all work? And he was like, yeah, well, we're not going to come to work. We're just going to show up at the school and we're going to stand at the front gate and we're going to be, the term they used was picketing. We're going to have a picket line and we're going to be, we're going to be protesting. Basically, it's a mini form of a protest, a strike, right? And we're not going to teach, we're not going to go into the classroom, we're not going to take our lessons, etc., etc. So obviously my first question as usual is that, so what about the children? What's going to happen for them? And he explained, obviously, if enough teachers explain that they're striking in advance, then the students don't come to school. Or if they don't know, then the students will come to school, have substitute teachers, and then if there's not enough substitute teachers, the children might get sent home, right? So he was sharing with me the logistics. So I remember asking him then, okay, so what's the purpose of the strike? And he said to me, it's because they've given us salary freezes and they're not giving us our 1% raise. And I just remember thinking to myself that day, I'm a math teacher. Like, guys, I can't emphasize this more than how I've emphasized it. Like, think about what I just said. I'm a math teacher, which means I should be able to do the maths. And I'm going to put at risk, at the time, what was probably a 30-something £1,000 salary for a 1% raise on that salary. Now, for those of you who are deep into unions and deep into all of the stuff I'm talking about, I'm not saying it's not worth striking for. Like, it is worth striking for. But what I'm saying deeper to that is the energy that was being put in to stand outside and strike for a 1% raise could have been energy that could have been used to start a whole new business. Could have been energy that could have been used to, if you're into this kind of thing, do a side hustle. Could have been energy that could have been used to figure out how to buy a property, or at least, let me even go to the lowest, smallest common denominator. That could have been energy that could have been used to rent out your garage or a room in your house to generate way more income than a 1% raise. Because I'll share this with you. A £30,000 salary, and again, I'm not saying everybody who worked in a school at that time was on a £30,000 salary, but a £30,000 salary, okay, 1% of that, if you do the maths right, 10% of that is £3,000 in a year. And again, I'm not even getting into the fact that on a £30,000 salary, you don't see £30,000 because tax is taken before, pension is taken before, student loan is taken before you even get the little bit more, okay? So on a £30,000 salary, 10% is £3,000, 1% is £300. So as a teacher, I was being encouraged, and I'm not saying this to say it was negative, guys. I want you to understand, I'm saying it to say this was just a situation. I was being encouraged to strike and put my £30,000 salary on the line in hopes to be able to get an extra £300 the next month. When, as mentioned a moment ago, I could have put the same energy in order to go rent out a room in my house, in order to buy a £7,000 garage in my area and rent that out to someone who runs events and needs some space to store their stuff when their events are not running, and charge them £400-500 a month, and make my money back in year one, and then in year two start making profit of in excess of the same £300 I'm attempting to fight for a whole year. I could have been making that in excess of that each month. So again, this is not to say if you're part of a union, don't strike. This is not to say if you work a job, don't ask for a raise. This is not to say any of that. This is to say, are we spending all our time attempting to rehearse for something that's live, which we actually can't do? Or are we taking it upon ourselves to take a step back, think, look at things, and actually review them so that we can make prepared steps rather than ignorant steps? So I'm going to wrap this one up here. For those of you who watched all the way to this part of the video, I want to give you something. So similar to what I did in my other video, I'm going to read a quote to you as a value add. Hopefully this will be beneficial, blessings, and helpful to you. This quote is from Helen Keller. She was a disability rights activist, and her quote is, "We could never learn to be brave and patient if there were only joy in the world." We can never learn to be brave and patient if there were only joy in the world. With that being said, Sammy, I can win. I'm out. Remember, let me share with you guys. Small keys like these open up big doors, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Let's go.